Hey guys, this is Miss Lambert. So I thought what we would do for end of the year, if you guys wanted to, we're going to read Midnight for Charlie Bone. And this book is written by Jenny Nimmo, or Nimmo. Nimmo? I'm always afraid that I mispronounce her name, but you can see it here, Jenny Nimmo. Midnight for Charlie Bone. This is book 1. It is a series. It's a really good series, guys. Let's start with the beginning so we can see what this book's about. So we're going to first read the prologue, which kind of gives you some insight into the story and what it's about. Long, long ago, a king arrived in the north. They called him the Red King because he wore a red scarlet cloak, and his shield was emblazoned with the burning sun. It was said that he came out of Africa. This king was also a marvelous magician, and each of his 10 children inherited a small part of his power. But when the king's wife died, 5 of his children turned to wickedness, and the other 5, seeking to escape the corruption that surrounded their evil siblings, left their father's castle forever. Broken-hearted, the Red King vanished into the forest that covered the kingdoms of the north. He did not go alone, however. He was followed by his 3 faithful cats. Leopards, to be precise. We must never forget the cats. The manifold and fabulous powers of the Red King were passed down through his descendants, often turning up quite unexpectedly in someone who had no idea where they came from. This is what happened to Charlie Bone and to some of the children he met behind the grim gray walls of Bloor's Academy. Chapter 1. Charlie Hears Voices. On a Thursday afternoon just after tea, Charlie Bone saw smoke. He happened to be looking out of his window when a dark cloud lifted above the autumn trees. The wind blew it south, and it moved through the sky like a great floating whale. Somewhere on the other side of the city, there was a fire. Charlie could hear the fire engine racing toward it. He had no idea that in mysterious and unexpected ways he was connected to it and would soon be drawn to the place where it had begun. Charlie slept well, got up the next morning, and went to school. After school, Charlie and his friend, Benjamin Brown, walked home together as usual. The cloud of smoke had gone, but the sky was stormy and dark. A fierce wind sent red and gold leaves racing down Filbert Street. Benjamin crossed the road to number 12, while Charlie stopped at number 9. Most of the people who lived at number 9 complained about the large chestnut tree in front of it, how dark it made their rooms, how damp and creaky it was, and how it would probably fall on the roof one day and kill them all in their beds. Needless to say, no one at number 9 did anything about it. Complaining to one another was as far as they went. They were that sort of family, or rather, those sorts of families. As Charlie ran up the steps to his front door, the tree sighed and rained a handful of chestnuts on his head. Luckily, his thick, wiry hair softened the blows. Thick hair had its uses, though not many. Charlie was always being told to smarten himself up, an impossible task for someone with hair like a hedge. "Hello, Grandmas," Charlie called as he stepped into the hall. There were 2 grandmas at number 9. Grandma Jones was Charlie's mother's mother, and Grandma Bone was Charlie's father's mother. Grandma Jones was round and cheerful and bossy, while Grandma Bone spoke only to complain. She rarely smiled, and nothing made her laugh. Her hair was thick and white, and she wore long, stiff dresses in shades of black, gray, or brown. Never pink, which was Macy's favorite color. Grandma Jones liked to be called Macy, but Charlie wouldn't have dared call Grandma Bone by her first name, which was Griselda. She liked to remind people that, before she had married Mr. Bone, she had been a Ubeam. The Ubeams were an ancient family, their history littered with artistic people and others who had more unusual talents such as hypnotism, mind reading, and bewitchery. Charlie knew he had disappointed Grandma Bone by being ordinary. Even worse, in her eyes, he was quite happy to be ordinary. When Charlie came home from school, it was always Macy who gave him a wet kiss on his cheek, pushed something to eat under his nose. Today, Macy had a large bump on her forehead. "Silly chestnut," she told Charlie. Grandma Bone was always sitting in a rocker by the stove, criticizing Macy's cooking or the state of Charlie's hair. Today the rocker was empty. That was the first unusual thing. It was Benjamin's 10th birthday on Saturday, and Charlie had decided to make him a birthday card instead of buying one. He'd taken a photo of Benjamin's dog, Runnerbean, smiling, or, to be more precise, showing his long, incredibly yellow teeth. Charlie had asked his mother to get the photo enlarged at Quick Photo on her way home from work. He intended to draw a big balloon saying "Happy Birthday, Benjamin" above Runnerbean's head. The second unusual thing was about to happen. At 5 minutes past 4, Charlie's mother came in with a box of overripe apples and rhubarb. "They'll make a lovely cobbler," she said, dumping the box beside Charlie's plate and kissing his shaggy head. Amy Bone worked part-time at the greengrocer's shop, so there was always plenty of fruit and vegetables at number 9. Charlie leaned away from the rotting fruit. "Have you got my photo, Mom?" he asked. Well, Amy Bone poked around in her shopping bag and found a large orange envelope. She put it on the other side of Charlie's plate. Charlie opened the envelope and revealed not Runnerbean. Nothing like Runnerbean. It was that moment that Grandma Bone appeared. She hovered in the doorway, fingering her neck, touching her silver white hair, and pulling her stiff black shirt. She looked somehow as though she were on the brink of fulfilling her destiny. And in a way, she was, though. At 65, you could be forgiven for thinking it was a bit late. The photograph that Charlie now held showed a man holding a baby. The man sat on an upright chair. He had thinning grayish hair and a long, mournful face. His crumpled suit was black, and his thick pebble glasses gave his pale gray eyes a lost, marble-like stare. Instead of pushing the photograph back into the envelope, Charlie continued to gaze at it. In fact, he couldn't tear his eyes away from it. He began to feel dizzy, and his ears were filled with mysterious sounds, like the hiss and swish of voices on the radio when you can't pinpoint the right frequency. "Oh," he said. What?" His own voice seemed far away, trapped behind a kind of fog. "What's wrong, Charlie?" asked his mother. "Is something happening?" Grandma Bone crept forward. "Aunt Eustacia rang me. She had one of her premonitions. Are you a proper U-beam after all?" Macy glared at Grandma Bone, while Charlie pulled his ears and shook his head. If only the horrible muffled buzzing would stop. He had to shout in order to hear himself. "They made a mistake at the shop. Where's Runnerbean?" "There's no need to shout, Charlie." His mother looked over his shoulder. "My goodness, that's certainly not a dog." "Oh!" wailed Charlie, but suddenly the mumbling voices broke free of the buzz and made themselves clear. First came a woman's voice, soft and unfamiliar. "I wish you wouldn't do this, Motson." "Her mother's gone. I don't have a choice." The voice was definitely male. "Of course you do." "Will you take her then?" said the man's voice. "You know I can't," replied the woman. Charlie looked at his mother. "Who said that?" She looked puzzled. "Who said what, Charlie?" "Is there a man in here?" he asked. Macy giggled. "Only you, Charlie." Charlie felt claw-like fingers sink into his shoulder. Grandma Bone leaned over him. "Tell me what you hear," she demanded. "Voices," said Charlie. "I know it sounds silly, but they seem to be coming from this photograph." Grandma Bone nodded. "What do they say?" "Oh, for goodness sakes, Grandma Bone, don't be ridiculous," said Macy. Grandma Bone gave Macy a withering look. "I'm not being ridiculous." Charlie noticed that his mother had gone very quiet. She pulled out a chair and sat down, looking pale and anxious. Macy began to bang pans about, muttering, "You shouldn't encourage it. It's all garbage. I won't have it." "Shh!" hissed Charlie. He could hear the baby crying. The strange woman spoke again. "You've upset her. Look at the camera, Motson. And please try to smile. You look so gloomy." "What do you expect?" said the man. The camera shutter clicked. "There, shall I take another?" "Do what you want." "You'll thank me one day," said the woman behind the camera. "If you really intend to go through with this, it's the only thing you'll have to remember her by." Charlie noticed the cat peeked out from behind the man's chair. It was an extraordinary color, deep copper, like a flame. From far away, Charlie heard his mother's voice. "Shall I put the photo back, Charlie?" "No," murmured Charlie. "Not yet." Oh, but it seemed that the photograph had nothing more to say. The baby fussed for a moment and then was quiet. The gloomy man stared silently at the camera. And the cat? Was that a purr? Macy was making such a noise with the pots and pans it was difficult to hear anything else. "Hush!" commanded Grandpa Bone. "Charlie can't hear." "It's all nonsense," Macy grumbled. "I don't know how you can just sit there, Amy, and let your crazy mother-in-law get away with it. Poor Charlie. He's just a boy. He's got nothing to do with those silly U-beams." "He's got their blood," said Charlie's mother quietly. "You can't get away from that." Macy couldn't. She closed her mouth in a tight little line. Charlie was very bewildered. In the morning he had been an ordinary boy. He hadn't been touched by the magic wand or banged on his head. He hadn't had an electrical shock or fallen off a bus or, as far as he knew, eaten a poisoned apple. And yet, here he was, hearing voices from a piece of photographic paper. To set his mother's mind at rest, Charlie said, "I don't think it was anything, really. I just imagined it." Grandma Bone leaned even closer and breathed into his ear. "Listen tonight. Things work better after midnight." "He'll be asleep by then, I'll have you know," said Macy, who had ears as sharp as rabbits. "It's all garbage." "Ha!" retorted Grandma Bone. "Just you wait." She walked away, leaving a scent of mothballs and mint drifting around the kitchen. "I didn't hear anything," Charlie said when she had gone. "Are you sure?" his mother asked anxiously. "Honestly, I was just doing this to tease Grandma Bone." He was trying to convince himself as well as his mother. "Charlie, you're a wicked boy," Macy said happily as she banged her meat cleaver into the meaty bone. Charlie's mother looked relieved and opened the evening paper. Charlie slipped the photograph back into the envelope. He felt exhausted. Perhaps a bit of TV would help him to relax. But before he could escape, the doorbell rang and Grandma Bone could be heard saying, "It's Benjamin Brown, isn't it? Charlie's in the kitchen, and you can leave that mangy baked bean outside." "It's Runner, not Bait," said Benjamin's voice. "And I can't leave him outside. It's raining." "Dogs like rain," said Grandma Bone. Benjamin's dog appeared in the kitchen. Benjamin was a small, pale-faced boy with hair the color of damp hay. Runnerbeam was a large, long-nosed dog with hair the color of damp hay. For some reason, Benjamin was always being picked on by the other boys. People stole things from him, tripped him, and laughed at him, and Charlie tried to help his friends, but sometimes Benjamin was beyond help. Sometimes, in fact, Charlie thought that Benjamin didn't even notice that he was a victim. He lived in a world of his own. Runnerbeam, smelling a meaty bone, rushed straight to Maisie and began to lick her ankles. "Get off me!" she yelled, swiped him on the nose. "You're coming to my party, right, aren't you, Benjamin?" asked Charlie. "Well, of course I am," said Charlie, immediately feeling guilty about the birthday card. "Good, because I'm getting a game that needs 2 people to play it." Charlie realized that no one else would be at Benjamin's party. This made him feel even more guilty. Runnerbeam began to whine, almost as if he guessed that he wouldn't be appearing on Benjamin's birthday card. "I'll be there," said Charlie cheerfully. He hadn't bought a present yet. He would have to rush out to the store before he began his quest. But what quest was that? Something seemed to be hijacked in Charlie's thoughts. "Want to come for a walk with Runner?" Benjamin asked hopefully. "Okay." Maisie shouted something about supper as Charlie and Benjamin left the house, but the wind howled around their heads and clap of thunder drowned her words. Runnerbeam yelped as a chestnut hit his nose, and Benjamin managed to smile at last. As the 2 boys and the dogs ran into the wind, leaves flew in their faces and stuck to fur and clothes. Charlie felt better in the open air. Perhaps it really had been a trick of his imagination. He hadn't heard voices at all. It was just some silly nonsense that he'd made himself believe. And Grandma Bone had encouraged him just to annoy Macy and upset his mother. "Yes," Charlie cried happily, "it's all garbage." "And leaves," said Benjamin, who thought Charlie meant the litter being blown down the street. "And leaves," sang Charlie. He saw a newspaper flying toward him and stuck his foot out to catch it, but the paper lifted in a sudden gust and wrapped itself around his waist. As he pulled it away from him, a picture on the front page caught his eye. A mean-looking boy stood on the steps of a gray building. He had a long, narrow face, and a wispy mustache grew above his thin upper lip. His dark hair, parted in the center, had been drawn back into a ponytail. "What's that?" asked Benjamin. "Just a boy," said Charlie, and yet he had a suspicion that this wasn't just any boy. Benjamin leaned over Charlie's arm and read, "Manfred Bloor, age 17, was rescued from a fire at Bloor's Academy yesterday. Manfred said he was lucky to be alive." "No, he didn't," said Charlie breathlessly. "What do you mean he didn't?" said Benjamin. "He didn't say that," Charlie murmured, and he suddenly sat on the ground with his back to the wall. He held the paper at arm's length, dismayed by the words that were creeping out of the picture. "Someone's going to pay for this." "How'd you—" Benjamin began. "Shut up, Ben," Charlie said. "I'm listening." "What to?" "Shh!" As Charlie stared at Manfred Bloor, he heard a lot of shouts, and a woman's voice broke through the others. "Are you accusing someone, Manfred?" "You're right, I am," said a husky voice. "Why do you think it wasn't an accident?" the husky boy began. "I'm not stupid, that's why." A man said, "The fire department told us a candle was probably blown over. Do you believe this?" "Enough!" Whoever said this was such a deep and chilling voice? Charlie dropped the paper. It whirled away and flopped into the gutter. "Charlie, what's going on?" asked Benjamin. Charlie gave a deep sigh. "I'm hearing voices," he said. "Oh, no!" Benjamin sat beside him, and Runner being crouched beside Benjamin. "What sort of voices?" Benjamin never, ever said. That's garbage. He took life seriously, which wasn't always a bad thing. Charlie told Benjamin about the photograph of Runner Bean that had gotten mixed up with a man and a baby. "It was going to be a surprise birthday card for you," said Charlie, "and now it won't be. I'm sorry." "Doesn't matter," said Benjamin. "Go on about the photograph." Charlie explained that he'd heard voices when he looked at the man and the baby. He'd even heard the baby cry, and maybe a cat purring. "Weird," Benjamin breathed. "I made myself believe I'd just imagined it," said Charlie, "but when I saw the newspaper, it happened again. I could hear reporters talking to that boy on the front page. I could hear his voice, too. He sounded kind of mean and sly. And then someone said, 'Enough!' And that was the worst voice I'd ever heard in my whole life." Benjamin shivered, and Runnerbean whined in sympathy. The boys sat side by side on a damp pavement, not quite knowing what to do. The wind flung leaves on them, and the thunder rumbled in the distance. It began to rain. Runnerbean nudged Benjamin and whined. He hated getting wet. And then, during a particularly loud clap of thunder, a man appeared in front of the boys. He was wearing a dark raincoat, and his wet hair was plastered over the forehead and his wide black bangs. "It's raining," the man announced. "Had you not noticed?" Charlie looked up. "Uncle Patton," he said in surprise. Uncle Patton was Grandma Bones' brother. He was 20 years younger than she was, and they didn't get along. Patton led a secret life, even eating apart from others. He never went outside in the daylight. "Oh, you're wanted at home," Uncle Patton told Charlie. Charlie and Benjamin stood up and shook their cramped legs. This was the third unusual thing to happen today. It wasn't nearly dark enough for Uncle Patton to venture out. Charlie wondered what could possibly have happened to cause such a drastic action. So, tomorrow in the next video, we'll read about the U-beam ants. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this part, and I look forward to reading for you tomorrow.